All right, welcome to this week's episode of the Vets in Real Estate Podcast. I am joined by RE/MAX's Dave Rosenfeld, going to tell his story about his transition out of the military and into a career in real estate. Dave, thank you so much for joining us this week.
Absolute pleasure to be here.
Yeah, so prior Army, tell us what you did. Obviously, the airborne is pretty nice and proud right there in your shirt, but other than being airborne, tell us more about what you did.
I joined the Army at 17, right out of a high school. Completed basic training and nobody talked bad about me. 1982. So first duty station was with the 3rd Armored Division in Germany. For those of you that are history buffs, you'll know that the 3rd Armored Division was really the spearhead armored division during the World War. From there, I went to jump school and ended up with the 82nd Airborne Division as a tanker. The only airborne armor battalion in the world was the 3rd Battalion Airborne 73rd Armor, and we would jump out of airplanes with our tanks. Not in the tank, just with the tank.
It'd be a fun ride, I'd imagine.
No, I mean, that's an easy way to die, but, you know.
Okay.
From there, I ended up as an NCOES instructor and then got sent to the dark side, what we lovingly refer to as Army Recruiting Command, and ended up retiring as the Chief of Plans and Doctrine at the headquarters of the Army Recruiting Command at Fort Knox. So that's the background in a nutshell for the Army.
Awesome. So then what, sounds like you had a pretty full career. Did you do your 20 years and decide to find something else, or?
So I did 22 years in the Army, and the beauty of sitting on a general officer's staff is that people tend to get pretty complacent. You know, you start doing that same thing every day. As those that are out in the field know, your days are different every day. You're going to the rifle range, you're going to the tank gunnery range, you're doing land navigation, or whatever it is you do for your skill set. Sitting on a general officer's staff, it's literally just that. It's staff work. And I, as the Chief of Plans and Doctrine, ended up becoming a babysitter for field grade officers. I ran the pre-command course, I ran the executive officers course, I ran the annual training conference, and in between all of that, I rewrote doctrine and had a staff of a couple of master sergeants and a couple of handfuls of other senior non-commissioned officers, sergeants first class. But the war was in full swing at that point. We got to 2004, and I had to have a hearty conversation with my general and say, hey, look, send me to Iraq, send me to Afghanistan, send me to Alaska. I don't care, but I need to get out of the headquarters because I don't feel like I'm doing my part here. We've been through Grenada, we've been through, Panama, Desert Shield, Desert Storm. We've been through all these others, and now I'm sitting here on a staff. And of course, his answer was, this is where you're needed. And we've all gotten to that point where we just decide, okay, it's time to arm wrestle the general, and they don't always win, but usually they do. But I just flat out told them, look, one way or the other, I have to go. And so you're either going to allow me to continue to serve, and I'm going to go out forward, or it's time for me to pull pitch and head out the door. So the very difficult decision was made at that point that it's time to retire. And so 2004 came and went, and September I was retired, and that's a whole different story. It's very easy to get lost when you've lived from 17 to literally almost 40 years of age in that uniform, and then step away from it.
So how was that stepping away? You didn't go directly into real estate. You had some other kind of career ventures here and there, but how was that stepping away? Was there anything that just really kind of stuck out that I don't know, was just not what you expected?
Well, I expected people to uphold the standards of the military. So, I, you know, uh, it was very difficult because my mindset was still, you're in the Army. And so, you walk into that civilian place and even your soldiers that you worked with, and I was very blessed. I walked into a contract job my first year where I was hired to literally just rewrite doctrine. So I basically went from doing it in uniform to now, instead of the babysitting aspect, it was just a rewrite of the command doctrine. So I was rewriting doctrine for the Army Recruiting Command. But I walked into the office one day on a Friday, and everybody's sitting around a conference table drinking a beer. And I literally was like, what in the hell are you guys doing? And they're like, we're having a meeting. And I'm like, what is this? And they're like, dude, everybody here's retired. We're not in the Army anymore. Have a beer. And I was like, um, yeah, and it was very uncomfortable for me. It was hard, and these are
Sure.
all guys that I'd known in service. They're all just sitting around having a beer. They're chilling, talking about the job. And it was just like, no, I can't do that.
Are
You
you
know?
guys punking me? Are you guys the trick for the new guy? Like, what
No,
are you
that
doing
it
to
was
me?
just it was a Friday afternoon at noon, and they
Mm,
were like, okay, we're winding down for the week. We're talking through everything that we've gotten accomplished that week. There was nothing nefarious about it. It was literally just, it's Friday afternoon. We're getting ready to go home. We're sitting around as a team and we're having this conversation. But, you know, for 22 years, we were not having beers at lunch. Now,
no.
that said, the generation before us, they'd sit around on a Wednesday and have a beer at lunch. That's what they
Mm,
did. You went to the NCO club, and people were always having a beer at lunch.
right.
Literally, the regulation said no more than two drinks while on duty. And it was like, I couldn't get my head around that. So
Yeah.
I did that for a year. We got the doctrine rewritten, and we moved forward. When I say we, I was offered a job with a firearms training company that we sold systems that use simulation to train our troops better.
Mm,
And so the company was focused very squarely on law enforcement, and they hired myself and another gentleman to break into the military market. So my job was to demonstrate the capabilities of this system, and this system could be scaled. So we had small classroom units that it worked on projection, and the
mhm.
system was fantastic. It had avatars. It was not just a pop-up bullseye target. It wasn't our Soviet soldier that we've all seen downrange on our rifle ranges, but it was an actual human moving target. And you use the laser in the weapon
Hmm.
to engage that target. Now, the beauty of this system is it worked with live fire as well. So we could scale from doing laser engagements to then using simunition, which, if you're not familiar with simunition, it's literally a lipstick bullet. It's an actual projection or projectile. And then you can actually scale that up into live rounds.
Hmm.
So we can take the system and start in a recruiting station and teach kids, and every recruiter for every branch of service is a non-commissioned officer. You've got sergeants to sergeants first class for the most part, or sergeants to gunnies, or petty officers to chiefs. But everybody there's got a job to lead, mentor, and train. That's what we do as NCOs. So if I can take you as a brand new private who's never done anything, and I can teach you how to read a compass, what a
Hmm.
map is, and what are those terrain features, and in this situation, how to deal with sight alignment, breath control, and trigger squeeze. By the time you get to basic training and those drill sergeants and the cadre there get you, you already understand those basic fundamentals. The washout rate in on the rifle range or the requal rate or anything else diminishes greatly. You should
Hmm.
be much better qualified to hit that range. And so we got it fielded to the recruiting command. We got it into a lot of the ROTC departments,
Mm.
but then we were able to get it also into the special operations community. So there are a couple of ranges that are extraordinarily famous within the special ops community. One at Little Creek in Virginia, one at Fort Bragg that are renowned for our soft communities. And we built live fire shoot houses. So we could take a team of brand new guys who are just going through soft training, and you and I have never shot together. I don't want you standing behind me with a loaded round, no, getting excited and putting a bullet through the back of my head.
Yeah, bad
So
day.
we are able to then project all of these scenarios on walls throughout a live fire shoot house, and we can run through that with lasers.
Mm.
So, do you know how to clear the room? Are you coming up? What are you doing? And then once we've done this scenario 15, 20, 30 times, then we migrate to simunition. And it is amazing how many people you see get shot and they start yelling at each other. And, these are supposed to be the absolute best of the best, right? They're soft guys. And then you get into the live rounds, and
Mm.
nobody argues about I hit that bad guy, I hit him more than a soft guy because they believe that they don't miss a target.
Mm.
The beauty of this system was simply that you could isolate individual pixels because it's all being read as an XY
Mm.
uh, grid, and it's all coordinates. So you can say, I hit that target, I hit that target. But when you slow it down, we had the capability of literally going slow motion, and I could physically peel your skin off of the avatar. So if I show you, you didn't hit the target because that target was running and your bullet struck right underneath the arm, visually you think you hit that target. But if I can show you exactly where that target hit, or I hit that guy and he got back up, well, did you hit that guy in the fatty tissue of his arm, or did you actually hit him square in the chest and
Mm.
rupture his sternum? When we're dealing with our absolute best, you have to break it down because that's what they are doing. They're going for kill shots. They are not going to wound or anything like that.
Mm.
So I had a lot of fun with that company. Unfortunately, the leadership of that company, uh, there were two primary owners. One was very easy to work with, and one was not. And the thing about civilian life is it's not, you wait 2 years and you've got a new leader. These are oftentimes small, quote unquote, family owned businesses or, partnerships, and they're not going anywhere, but you are.
Mm.
And so you learn and you grow. At that point, I got introduced to a company that was not too far from my home. It was a fantastic company that made secure storage for weapons and explosives. If you've ever been around a military installation and you see a white box sitting next to a building, it's that company's white box. During the entire war, a lot of buildings, a lot of barracks were being torn down and rebuilt. You still
Mm.
had to have a secure place to store your weapons and everything else. The Navy and the Air Force always has to have secure places for explosives on flight lines and all of that kind of stuff. So they have to be able to move that stuff. And so that's what we did. But we expanded that company into a company that also made relocatable skiffs.
Mm.
So if the armed, the service or the State Department had a requirement to put a skiff in, the green zone, we built that skiff. It got flown over into theater, set up, got anointed, and then was operational. Whereas trying to build a skiff in Iraq with
Impossible.
local labor and local equipment it's almost impossible. We all heard about the Russian embassy that was built, and they used local labor, and there was a microphone put every 6 inches, and that kind of
Hmm.
thing. That's why we had to build them here at stateside with Americans that had security clearances, and then relocate them over there. And honestly, they were relocated under an armed guard and everything else. Um, but had the pleasure of working with them for years as well. And again, a family-owned business that those of us who are used to being able to show our skill sets and move up with a family-owned business, it just is what it is, and it's going to be that family member or a family member that moves up into those leadership roles. It's not going to be somebody that's doing really well. You know, I had, I'm 46 years old at that point, and a 23-year-old who family member, a nephew or a son or whatever, um, has just earned his MBA, and he's now going to take over as the vice president. Um, Not that they're not qualified, but they don't have the life skills that some of us that are older do have. Um, Again, so I moved into another company that was a tactical equipment company, a major corporation, worked all over the country, and that was my first exposure to retail. Everywhere else, I've been working with government employees or service members who we spoke the same language. I got into this tactical organization, and I ran their product through every military exchange in the world. So it was there that I had the pleasure of going and visiting Cuba and going to Gitmo and seeing some of our service members out there, and as well as other places. And it just got to the point where it finally dawned on me. I have an amazing backyard. I have a beautiful pool. I have my kids and I have grandchildren. And I am traveling more now than I ever did while I was in uniform. And it just kind of lit up that at some point you have to make a decision as, are you chasing the money? Are you chasing the promotions? Or are you honestly just ready to enjoy life?
Mm.
And that was my introduction to real estate. My brother is a REMAX agent in Maryland. My son is a realtor in Las Vegas. One of the guys that I served in the 82nd with is a realtor in Denver. And they all kind of said the same thing. Hey, dumbass, you're pretty good at selling. Maybe you want to think about becoming a realtor. And I was like, oh, I don't know. So I took the class. It's it's not hard to get licensed in real estate. Unfortunately, in
Mhm.
my personal opinion, it should be a lot harder. Our barred entry into this business, where we are leading people through the sale or purchase of what is most likely the greatest asset they have in their portfolio. Um, we get people that really don't understand even what a portfolio is, and they're very transactional. Whereas I am very relational in my business. When I get a client, I don't refer to them as my clients; they're my peeps,
Mm.
and it's just a different mindset. So, it's okay to be transactional if that's what you want. That's great. Go out and do each of those, but it's just like any other business. It's a lot harder to find that new hire and get them trained than it is to keep that person that's been with you for a while happy. So I'm a relational guy. I want to have those relationships with my people. So
That's fair.
that was my entrance into real estate.
So it's interesting. The more and more we've done this, it, there's a few things that we keep seeing over and over. One of them is former recruiters moving in, which I think makes a lot of sense. That uh, if you can sell somebody to sign the dotted line, sign their life away, selling a house or selling a commercial building should be relatively easy in comparison, right? At least that's the thought process. They teach you how to go through. Did you kind of see that same there's a lot of things that you took from recruiting school and your time in recruiting that just made sense kind of coming into sales?
So, as an Army recruiter, as a Marine Corps recruiter, whatever the case may be, I'm not really sure about Space Force yet. Um, we literally sell, if you will, the intangibles,
Mm.
things that you cannot see, touch, taste, feel. I can let you hold a rifle, but that's really not giving you a tangible experience of what the military is going to be like. I cannot convey, other than through stories, what it's like to stand on the deck of an aircraft carrier. I can show you pictures of guys on an aircraft carrier. The Navy's going to show you guys in green shirts and yellow shirts and pink shirts and black shirts, and they're going to sit there and tell you these are all different skill sets. These are different people
Mm.
that have different jobs, even though they're standing right next to each other. They're all right there. They cannot express to you what it means to have a ship that's doing this while an aircraft is coming in doing this. We're talking about two moving things.
Right.
Oh, by the way, it's nighttime and it's raining. You cannot convey that kind of fear. I will give absolute props to the sailors who work on an aircraft carrier. There's a lot of stupid things that I've done. I've jumped out of airplanes hundreds of times. I've literally been hit on the back of the head by the main gun of a tank and knocked out cold.
Mm.
I'm not taking myself and putting myself on the deck of an aircraft carrier. I'll be the cook, 3 stories down. You know what I mean?
Right.
But you cannot see, touch, taste, or feel those experiences. You don't feel what it's like to be in a tank. I can show you a video of a tank running across the field. You don't understand the rumble and the energy of a 70-ton tank until you've been there. So that goes back to storytelling. And we can tell those stories, and obviously, people enlist in those services based on those stories that we tell. When it comes to real estate, we have two things that we really excel at. Recruiters excel at being able to tell stories. I want you to think about what it's going to be like next year while your furniture is in this home and you are hosting for the very first time the Thanksgiving for your family. I want you to think about the smells. What is the cookies smell like, or the pumpkin pie smell like, versus the turkey that you're cooking in the backyard in that fryer? What are the sounds that you hear when you're all gathered around this table and everybody's laughing, and we all have that one sibling that's going to yell at their kids for not eating their mashed potatoes? It's that kind of thing. But the second thing that recruiters are exceptional at is understanding rejection.
Mm.
I've called that high school kid 30 times and they keep telling me no. Well, we all deal with rejection in every job that we do. Some of it's just more, personal. And when we're talking to somebody about, I want to be your realtor, if you're not good at telling your story, you will face rejection. Well, realtors tend to be very good at facing that rejection, understanding that it's usually just a question of asking for more information. I understand, Will, that you may not be comfortable with me being your realtor, but what I don't understand is why is that? Is it that I'm wearing a red shirt? Is it that you were a Marine and I was, Army and you need something else? Is it you're a civilian and you're not comfortable dealing with a soldier? There's always that question. And so recruiters tend to ask really good questions and they're able to overcome most of those objections. Um, you and I both know the number one question before anything, before I show a single home is, have you spoken to a lender? And a lot of people are like, I don't want to talk to a lender just yet. I want to go see these homes. Well, I really appreciate that. I do, because I don't want to feel pressured to do this either. But I need you to understand it's just like going onto that car lot. You need to know which car lot you should be going to. Are you qualified for the Lamborghini or the Maserati? Or do we need to focus on Toyota or Chevy? Or in the worst case scenario is do we just need to get you into a set of wheels and we need to go to CarMax because you need to be able to get from home to work. And you want to do that in your own personal vehicle versus riding a bus. What is the goal? And it's usually stepped. As you well know, we often have what we call starter homes. Sometimes that starter home is a brand new construction and it's just a little bit further outside town. Sometimes that starter home is 25, 30, 50, 100 years old, but it's in the center of town. So we have to understand what those people's needs, wants, and desires are, what is most beneficial to them, and we mentor and train and get them into that home while providing the insights of years of experience gives us, or just years of training.
Yeah, I can see that. I like how you really focused on the idea of rejection because I think that's one of the things when folks decide to get into a sales road or get into real estate in general, uh, they don't expect it. They're not. They don't. If you watch HGTV, you don't see rejections. You see them three houses and it's sold in half an hour. Like that's what we see. Where I mean, you and I both know the behind the scenes is they're actually already under contract on the house they're going to buy. They've already done all that. Everything else is for show. It doesn't happen in 30 minutes, but it's the, even with commercial, we're teaching a cohort with our folks now. And as we're going through, I was like, look, if you want to make 100 grand, you've got to have 300 contacts in your database and you're going to convert maybe 1 to 2% of those a year. And they're like, I'm going to call 3,000 people over and over again for a year and I'm going to get 1 or 2% of those. Like, yes, that's the numbers that you're dealing with. That is literally going to be 2,000 and change people calling to tell you no, or worse, cussing you out. How, if you're not used to that, if you're not a recruiter, if you're not used to that, how do you get used to that rejection?
Well, the first thing you have to know is that we've all been rejected, period. End of conversation. But if you're married, if you have been married multiple times, somebody has finally said yes, right? It wasn't the
Yeah.
first person that you dated that you married. So we learn early on, your first girlfriend or your first boyfriend in middle school, and then, a couple of weeks later there was somebody else, and then a couple of years later there was somebody else. So we've all been rejected at some point. We've all applied for a job and been told no. And it's not that you're a bad person, it's just that you may not be the right fit at that point. We know that within friendship, proximity is a huge factor in that. You have to be close to that person to be a good friend. And now, service members, we've got friends all over the country, all over the world, but those friendships will fade or take on a different connotation, than when we were standing right next to each other in the mud.
Hmm.
And that's just natural. It's the same when we talk about our database. If we don't keep in touch with people, people forget you're a realtor. Bottom line is, I had somebody that posted on Facebook a week ago that said, "Hey, does anybody know a realtor that has a military background?" And I literally was like, "What the hell?"
Me.
So I didn't even respond to the Facebook post. I picked up the phone and I'm like, "What the hell?" And she's like, "Oh my God, I forgot." Well,
Mm.
as a realtor, somebody who's self-employed, we can't afford to have people forget what we do.
Mm.
So we have to keep in touch, but we don't want to shove it down people's throats. So if you looked at my social media, you'll notice that most of my stuff is focused on family, cooking, um, and the people that I work with. It's not, look at me. This is like I'm standing up right now, so you see this. If I sit down, it disappears. It's
Mm.
it's above me. because I don't show this stuff off much. For me, when I'm talking with my people, it is these guys just did this. I was able to help these guys achieve this. It's not, Dave got an award. I'm the number one realtor in my house, you know? And by the way, I am the top realtor in my home, period. There's nobody that can compete with me. Um, but I will never be the top realtor in the state of Arizona. I don't have a desire to be the top realtor in the state of Arizona. And we all are at different stages of life. I want to be the single best realtor that my people have ever worked with. If you've bought 20 homes over your lifetime, I want to be the guy that you come back and think, damn, he was looking for termite tubes before we ever even entered the house. He was doing this, he was doing that. He negotiated this, he negotiated that. None of my other realtors ever did that. You know, that's what I want you to remember, because then when you say to your friends say to you, hey, we're thinking about buying a home. Oh, I don't care where you are in the country. I want you to talk to Dave first, because Dave knows what he's doing, and Dave has relationships all over the country. That's a big part of what I do. I spend thousands of dollars every year going to conferences so I can connect with the best of the best all over the country. Right before you and I got on here, I was on a Zoom call with REMAX agents in Texas, Virginia, um, North Carolina. You know, they're all over the country. We all share the fact that we're military veterans,
Mm.
but these are some of the best of the best. Um, I'm sure you're aware of what a certified residential specialist is, a CRS.
Mhm.
That's the pinnacle designation in real estate. And it's up there. I go to that conference every year because it's a small conference, because less than 1% of realtors in the country hold that designation. Doesn't matter if you're a Keller Williams agent, a real, a whatever they happen to have back on the East Coast, ERA or whatever the case may be. If you've earned that, you've earned a lot of respect.
Mm.
And so I would rather work with somebody who has put in the work and earned these designations that are pinnacle designations, than just work with a general person that you've never known or worked with before. So if you don't know somebody, you need to talk to people in the business
Mm.
and say, hey, I don't want to just pick somebody from Google. I want somebody that somebody actually knows.
Yeah, so what is the process for CRS? We've talked about on the show a few times with CCIMs, the commercial world. What is talk me through more what CRS is, what you get from that training, and obviously it sounds like there's a bit of a pedigree that goes along with it. But what is I guess if I was a new agent coming in, is that my immediate goal to start there, or where should I be looking at that in the pipeline?
So absolutely not. If you're a brand new agent, I would say, honestly, I never hunted designations until that one. But I wanted to learn, because most of us that are veterans, we know what we don't know.
Mm.
You know what you know what you don't know, and you don't know what you don't know, kind of thing. So I knew what I did not know, and that was literally everything. I didn't know my head from my butt when I got into real estate, neither did you. And anybody that sits here and says, "Oh, I knew all about it," even if your parents owned, 30 offices, that's not you. You're hearing stories, right? You haven't experienced it. So what I tell people is, you want to get your ABR, your accredited buyer's rep. You want to get your SRS, which is your seller's rep, and you want to get a PSA, which is a pricing strategy advisor. So if you're brand new to real estate, those are the three things I want you to focus on. From there, I want you to start going after your GRI, your Graduate of the Realtor Institute. GRI is an education based and a local education based designation. It is the bachelor's degree, if you will, of or you can call it the master's degree. I don't care. Call it whatever you want. But it is all about education to the nth degree. So when you go into real estate school, in Arizona anyway, it's really honestly bad. Um, and it's not the instructor's fault. It is what the state requires you to know.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think anybody gives a damn how many square feet are in an acre. But that is something that is driven into everybody's head, and that may have been important 50 or 60 years ago when you're sitting here saying, well, this property is 119,000 square feet. Well, how many acres is that? I don't know. Let me bust out my calculator, right? So it may have been really important back then. Meets and bounds may have been really important back then, or on a Texas ranch when you're talking about you got to go from the pecan tree down to the creek where the big boulder is. We don't. That's just not today's market.
Mm-hmm.
So understanding the contract is today's market. If you do not understand what every line of that contract means, as an agent, you're just wrong. And I can't begin to tell you how many people don't understand. Time is of the essence in Arizona. So just because you have a 10-day inspection period doesn't mean you want to wait until the 10th day to say whatever you're going to say. Time is of the essence. So you do your inspections, you do this. But the contract spells out very specific timelines. You've got this many days to do your inspection. Once you send that inspection result over to the listing agent, that listing agent and the sellers have this many days to respond. Once they respond, you have this many days to respond if you accept it or you reject it. You have this many days. You have to understand what those are, because if you don't, your client sure as hell doesn't. And if you miss that date, you may be doing a commissionectomy. You know what that is? When you're the agent and you're paying for those repairs that your client wanted because you didn't get that contract renegotiated. So it's that kind of a thing. So the GRI drills down into that, into literally word for word basis, but it's based on state, because what we do in Arizona is different than what they do in Boston.
Mm-hmm.
The CRS, as the pinnacle of that, is you have to have production. You have to have done X number of contracts. You have to have done X much in commission. So you have to have done all of this education plus this and this and this. So you know that when you're dealing with a CRS, they've got a specific amount, a minimum amount of education that is above and beyond the state's required CE. Because most of what we do in the CRS world does not count as CE in the state. So Arizona, up until a year ago, didn't give any CE at all for CRS training. So, and I hated it when I was doing it, because I'm like, man, this really should count. This is higher level education. But their thought process is, we want people that are dedicated to learning, not necessarily just doing this to get their CE done. So it's above and beyond.
Okay.
The CRS is what I lovingly refer to as the PhD of real estate. There are some schools now that are teaching a master's degree in real estate. I'm not a huge fan of that, because unless you're a broker owner or you're trying to run a real estate company, it's much more into P&Ls and everything else. So if you're running a 100-person office, that's a great education, phenomenal. But if you're a realtor and you're just worried about, taking care of your transactions and taking care of your people, it's really unnecessary. You need the boots on the ground education.
Okay, that's fair, and I like how you at least kind of gave a progression, because a lot of times it's, oh, go do this and that's it, but you can see where there's some logical progression in working with this, working with that, and then growing from there. Was that advice that you were given early on? Hey, these are the steps to grow, or was that something you just kind of found upon and learn through kind of trial and error, or?
So Dave is a bit of a hardhead. Um, and when I got into this, I was kind of, a fake it till you make it kind of thing, right? So I immediately went and got my ABR, my SRS, my PSA, and a few others because those were 1 or 2 day education classes.
Mhm.
And then I was doing my transactions and I was learning. Um, I had a broker who got his GRI in 1813, I think. Um, and he's a good dude. He really is. But he could never vocalize why the GRI was important. And I looked at the GRI. I couldn't even contemplate a CRS. But I looked at the GRI as that is so far beyond my scope right now. And honestly, it was because it's hard to sit here and go into any kind of advanced training if you don't understand the basics, if you don't have any experience. Nobody is going into that live fire shoot house I discussed. Nobody's going into any shoot house until they've actually been on the rifle range, going through basic training,
Mhm.
done a couple of tours. They've been here, been there, and they've gone down range with different training NCOs and stuff like that. We don't want to go from, and we have obviously throughout history gone from basic training to a combat zone. It is not ideal. And we can talk about something that everybody here probably understands, but never really got the education on, and that is the advent of targets. If you go back to World War, hell, go back to the Revolution. A target, when we learned to shoot a musket, as a 10 or 11 or a 12-year-old, it was literally just a piece of wood or a bottle that was set on a fence post. It was an inanimate object that we shot at. So then you come to World War One, and we took guys and said, "Here is a rifle. I want you to shoot that bullseye." And we watched as those guys went down range. Most people, and for most people, you can relate to Hollywood, and we all saw during World War II movies or Vietnam movies, guys that were in the trench, World War II, in the foxhole, Vietnam, where they held the rifle up over their head and they went bang, 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 bang. It's because there was nothing but fear.
Mhm.
And when you have that much fear, the adrenaline is coursing through your body and you're not going to hit your target. The flip side to that is we also know that Americans are raised with a certain respect for life. And the average person, I don't care if you're infantry, rangers, special forces, the average person, the normal person, does not want to take somebody's life. It's just not how we are raised.
Yeah.
So you get some cultures where they are raised to literally go and take life. That is what their culture is all about. If you go to some of the African tribes, they turn a kid loose at 12 or 13 and say, you have to go hunt this animal. And it's a specific animal because it is incredibly dangerous. And you have to take that and bring it back. And that's how you become a man, or that's how you get anointed as a warrior. The vast majority of Americans that have served in uniform have never had to take a life. 5% of us are combat arms. So truck drivers, cooks, admin personnel, they never had to go down range. Our current global wars, we had truck drivers who were never trained as infantrymen who took more casualties than any other MOS because of the IEDs and
Yep.
ambushes and everything else. So now you've got people that are struggling with PTS because they trained as a truck driver. They were just moving toilet paper from point A to point B or
Mhm.
moving ammunition from point B to point C. They weren't psychologically prepared for it. It's the same when we talk about the guys that were just praying and spraying. So we had to change from bullseyes So then we got into the Russian silhouettes because
Mm-hmm.
psychologically we had to have a mindset that we're shooting a person. But we realized quickly also that that person wasn't the little green army man that we all played with. That's not going to cover that. So then we got into targets. And if you go to any rifle range or pistol range, any indoor range today, the normal targets that we see are a hostage situation with a bad guy behind him, or
Mm-hmm.
even an alien. I mean, it might be an alien, and I mean a space alien, that we're engaging. It might be a zombie, but it is humanoid that
Mm-hmm.
we're looking at. The psychological difference of me seeing your face downrange and me knowing I have to engage you, seeing a face allows people to at least psychologically be prepared to see a face in the reticle when they're shooting. It's the same in real estate. If you've never been exposed to that contract, you are completely overwhelmed when you get that first contract. You have to have somebody sit down with you and say, okay, they're asking for 2% to go towards closing costs for that buyer. On top of that, they're asking you to come down $25,000. On top of that, they're asking you to pay 2.5% to the buyer's agent. So now you're literally seeing on paper your asking price of $300,000 is now going to net you 250. How do you convey that to your client, the seller? If you don't understand that, you're certainly not ready for the designation of a GRI or a CRS.
It's fair. So as we're starting to wrap this up, that's a great explanation. I love the storytelling you're coming along with this. It makes perfect sense. But as we're starting to wrap up and kind of looking back at your step into real estate, is there anything that you would have done differently, or maybe a lesson that you wish you didn't learn quite as hard as you learned?
That is probably the best question I've ever been asked. Because now you're asking about my experience and how that can convey to somebody brand new. Remax is the number one real estate brand in the world. Everybody knows the Remax balloons. My advice is more than anything, understand everybody wants to get into your pocket. Your photographer wants in your pocket. Somebody's going to sell you advertising at the high school to have a banner up on the ball field. Somebody else wants you to go into the American Legion and advertise on their TV. Understand that none of that is going to equate to anything. The reason I bring up Remax is we have phenomenal tools. Remax gives you KV Core. They give you all these other things as part of it, but you need to understand that this is your business. And at some point in your business, in your life, you may decide to migrate to a different brand. You may decide to open up your own brokerage. And so if your entire world is, in this case, Remax, if everybody sees Dave Rosenfeld at remax.net as my email address, if I decide to change to, Hoboken Real Estate Company, I've now lost. Everybody's lost because they can't communicate with me anymore. So my advice is get yourself your own web domain name. Mine is Dave at RosenfeldRealtyAZ.com. Everybody knows Dave Rosenfeld is who I am. I'm a realtor and I'm in Arizona. So it doesn't matter what company I go to, I own that
Mm-hmm.
that email domain. Don't allow yourself to be lost in Dave at Remax, Betty at KW, Jenny at ERA or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be your brand because nobody's hiring me theoretically because I'm a Remax agent. My Remax is my network, but they're hiring me because they've seen me on social media. The flip side of that is you have to be you all the time. So you cannot sit here and say, I absolutely love hiking, and then you take a post of you're hiking from your car to the grocery store. That's not hiking. People
Right.
want to see pictures of you out on a mountain somewhere, right?
Sure.
If
Yeah.
you're going to drive, and listen, folks, your hobbies can be your brand, okay? As a veteran, that's a huge part of my branding. But I am also very into hiking. That's why that came up. I'm very into wine and bourbon. So those are things that I post about a lot. And so that's my tribe.
Mm.
So if you are a recovering alcoholic, you're probably not going to want to see my feed, which talks about I'm drinking Bordeaux in France or I'm having this in Italy. It is about connecting with somebody that you personally have those same likes, you know. So be yourself. Don't let everybody tell you that you have to have this latest gimmick.
Mm.
And I'm here to tell you, be organic. Grow your network, grow your connections, because if you're dependent on Zillow leads, guess what? That is going in the toilet. If you want to go to work for a brand new construction company, you want to represent Toll Brothers Homes, that's great. Go do that. It's okay to be new construction. It's a phenomenal place to learn and to grow your database. So learn where you can learn and ask questions. People who are successful don't mind mentoring other people because my tribe isn't going to leave me for you just because you happen to see something.
Yep.
The follow on to that is do not be Facebook friends or social media friends with anybody, other realtors in your market, because you can't control how conniving other people are. And there are people that will literally go down your friends list and say, "Oh, I'm a realtor too. You should talk to me." So do not be friends. And I'm not saying block every other agent in town, but don't be friends with them.
Fair.
If you are personal friends with them, you can text them, you can call them. Just don't be connected to them on Facebook.
Fair. Well, Dave, that's great advice. This has been a great opportunity to learn about you and your story and all that. And I appreciate you so much for joining us today. And of course, we'll post these. And of course, if we have any questions, I hope you'd be more than willing to jump into those discussions as well and answer those questions that come up.
Well, you got my contact information. If people have questions or just want advice, I'm free. I'm not easy, but I'm free.
Dave, again, appreciate it. Thank you so much for your time and thank you so much for sharing your story.
Absolutely.